Hello, I'm Ginkgo from Comarebi Mind Healing Retreats by the Sea in Dawlish, Devon. Today's subject is what actually causes childhood adversity and trauma that goes on to affect our adult lives. It's a huge subject. I've written more on the blog, but here's a 5-minute little chat to tell you some of the key sources. Number 1, physical or sexual abuse. It can happen to the child, or it can be witnessed. It might have happened to one of the siblings. This will cause a great trauma, I'm sure, in most cases. The second one is actually fear. It could be fear of that physical abuse that I've just spoken about. Or it could be just worrying that it might happen for a variety of reasons. Mom and dad could be fighting. It could be fear of rejection. Sometimes it's actually fear that parents have got themselves, and they project that fear onto the child. The child could be fearful of being ridiculed or not good enough. Or it could be anger. Or it could be that the parents are on edge all the time because of their own trauma, and the child is walking around on eggshells trying to work out what they need to do to be safe. The third section is emotional abuse. We could certainly write a book, and I'm sure many books have been written on this subject. It's huge. Sometimes it's because the parents are not emotionally available. Quite often I hear someone say, my physical needs were met. I had a good upbringing, I had food on the table, money, cleanliness, I was taken to school, etc. But my parents were not emotionally available. There's a variety of reasons for this. Maybe the parents weren't interested, or maybe they were dealing with their own trauma, their own mental health issues, their own depression, and they were so stuck in their own mind that they weren't realizing that they were not present for the child. Sometimes emotional abuse can be being criticized or being judged. Sometimes the child recognizes or believes that there is favoritism, or they sense injustice or a lack of fairness. There's so many different reasons for this. A child at the end of the day needs to feel valued, they need to feel safe, they need to be seen, be heard, feel they matter, and they need to be deeply understood. And when these things are not present, that child is likely to be affected in adulthood and take that lack of value, and sometimes even feeling disposable with them through the rest of their life. The fourth category I've got here is absence or neglect. Now, it could be that the parents or one parent is trying their hardest to put bread on the table. In other cases, the family environment is affected by misuse of things like drugs and alcohol, and they were the priorities, and so there isn't enough money to put bread on the table. And sometimes that neglect is because of mental illness with the parents. Whatever the reason, sometimes the child isn't fed, looked after, the house is unclean or unhygienic. And sometimes the child, when they are distressed, their needs are not met because the parents aren't there for them. I had a lady recently, and I remember what she said. One day I went in, I'd cut my knee, and all I wanted was a hug, and my mother told me to go to the other room, don't be silly, don't do it again, and put a plaster on her wound. She felt neglected, emotionally and physically there. And that she took with her through the rest of her life. Boundaries and rules. Here's another little case study. gentleman staying with me last year, and he said, I don't know what's wrong with me. I had the perfect childhood. My parents loved me. I could do whatever I wanted. They never told me off. They hugged me. I could come home whenever I wanted. There was always money to go and buy things. So I really, he said, I don't know why I am like I am. When we peeled this back and looked a bit more detail, what we found was this: I can leave for school whenever I want to, come home whenever I want to, eat whenever I want to, had actually made him feel unsafe because no one was checking on him. He was aware that other children had boundaries and rules. And what seemed good at the time, actually, when he became an adult, had made him suffer. And so, although children might not like it at the time, what they really need is they do need boundaries about when to go to bed, what they can do, what they can't do. They need to be checked upon, whether it be their homework or whether they've eaten. And they'll thank you in the long run. The next section here I've got is called Children Need to Be Children, which sounds obvious. If we look historically, when families were large and people were perhaps poorer, this was a huge problem. Quite often the eldest child had to forsake their childhood to look after the other children. But I still hear examples of this today. And when children can't be children, they suffer, because children need to laugh, play, have fun, experiment, make mistakes. Sometimes it's because the parents weren't actually taught themselves by their parents how to have fun and how to play, and they were unable to pass this down. Another huge problem is when parents, for cultural or religious reasons, believe that the child shouldn't have fun and shouldn't be children because it might reflect on them badly. This is surely going to affect the children when they grow up, because their wings of self-expression were shut down and they couldn't be authentic. The next one is expressions of love. One could argue that your parents don't actually have to hug you or actually tell you that they loved you, because most of what we pick up from our parents is we watch them and we watch their behaviour. However, I think it's a good idea to tell your children that you love them and that you can hug them. But the key point is love needs to be present, and not just present with the parents and the child. The child will watch how the parents deal with each other and with the rest of the family. And when kindness and gentleness and love is there, that's a wonderful foundation for a child to grow up as a secure adult. The next one is when love appears to be conditional. Again, many of the physical needs of the child could be met. They're well dressed, they're well fed, they're well educated, they have all the activities that they want to try after school. But the child learns directly or indirectly that they should perform and succeed. And if the child believes that love is conditional, i.e. the parents will be unhappy if they're not successful in their career or their leisure sports or pursuits or their schoolwork, they grow up feeling that they're never good enough. And this, unfortunately, will affect the child, because for the rest of their life they'll try and prove their parents wrong. The next one is attunement, a funny word that often my spell check doesn't like. What does it mean? It means that the parents' love is attuned to the children. It's like one step beyond empathy. It means that if the child is at school doing one of their pursuits that they enjoy and they're disappointed, disappointment is felt by their parents. And maybe at school or in the playground or with their activities, when the child is delighted because things have turned out as they wanted to, maybe they won the school sports race, that the parents are feeling the joy that the child is feeling as well. When we have attunement, in Buddhism called mudita, or shared joy, then we have the foundation for a happy child and a safe child. A child needs to express itself. One of the first things when a child is not happy and has had adversity is it closes its wings of self-expression down. It stops playing with art or singing or where it could be judged. It stops giving advice or making decisions. It needs to be authentic and express itself. But it also needs to be able to feel safe to do that. And to express herself authentically, sometimes children have a dilemma. A parent could love a child and they could tell it it's loved and look after it in all the ways that it needs to. But what happens if that child believes that the love is conditional on the child being or acting in a certain way? For example, what happens if the gender of that child is not what the parents would approve of? What happens if that child was brought up gay and maybe their religion or just their preferences think that that's not good, and the child knows this because it's heard the parents talking about this? Now we have a real dilemma, because the child needs to feel loved to feel safe. However, it also needs to express its authenticity to feel safe. In this dilemma, what does it do? If it expresses its authenticity, it might lose the love of the parents. Generally speaking, at a young age, a child will trade in its authenticity for its parents' love, and it's not safe now for a different reason. If you go back to cavemen, when the brain was less developed, we lived more in our body. And when we live more in our body because we express ourselves more, we're more in touch with our intuition. And intuition keeps us safe. So when that child trades in its authenticity, it isn't safe. That's just a few of the things. The truth, the list is huge. Please read the blog. In further blogs and in further videos like this, I'll talk about what happens next, how a child grows up. Not just how trauma affects them as a child, but how it affects them as a teenager and how it affects us in adulthood. I hope you'll watch and I hope you'll listen. That's all for now. Thank you very much. Goodbye.